Hello, I'm Anilda Mirano. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Empowering Teachers Worldwide. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about active learning, and particularly active learning in primary and lower secondary classes. Now, I would like, first of all, to ask you to look at these two photographs and think, how would you describe these classroom situations? You can pause the recording for a minute and give yourself some time to think about it. As a teacher, one of your biggest challenges is to plan lessons that inspire your students to stay actively involved in the learning process. But you've probably noticed that traditional teacher-centered learning, as in the first photograph, isn't always conducive to achieving that inspiration. One of the most obvious ways to increase classroom charisma, if you wish, is to increase the amount of active learning in your class. Not only will you find it easier to keep students engaged during lessons, but also they will retain information with greater ease and with more success. So, what is active learning? Active learning is a process in which students engage in activities such as reading, writing, discussion, problem solving, instead of just sitting quietly and listening. It is the opposite of passive learning. It promotes analysis, synthesis, evaluation of class content. Active learning refers to a broad range of teaching strategies which engage students as active participants in their learning during class time. Typically, these strategies involve some amount of the students working together during the class, but also individual work and reflection. So it's a process that has student learning at its center. It focuses on how students learn and not just what they learn. Students are encouraged to think hard rather than passively receive information from you. And research shows us that it is not possible to transmit understanding to students by simply telling them what they need to know. Instead, we need to make sure that they challenge their own thinking and that the content challenges their own thinking. With active learning, students play an important part in their own learning process. They build knowledge and understanding in response to opportunities provided by us, teachers. Have a look at this. Here we have 5 activities that we typically do in the classroom. And again, I would like you to take a minute, you may pause this recording, and rank the activities in order from most active to least active. Now, any task can involve active learning. The key factor is what we do with it, how we organize work. As you see here, we have the same activities, but we have extended them so as to make them become more active. Answering an examination style question can be very passive, but if you do this in small groups and before sharing each with the class, each member of the group shares their impressions, it's different. You design a research investigation, but if you ask them to use a number of different resources, it's not just reading and copying. Listening to a lecture can be very passive, but if at the same time you ask them to complete, you ask the students to complete a missing word worksheet, for example, to reinforce what is covered, it becomes something more active. Making a poster can be quite passive, but If you ask the students to make a poster with a number of other students and in competition with other groups, it is different. Again, phoning a friend to discuss homework halfway through completing the homework can also become an active learning activity. So active learning doesn't really need any extra resources, equipment, or special seating arrangement to get started in your classroom. It can take as little as 1 minute to implement. And it can be very effective in shaping student confidence, communication, and knowledge. So, how can we get active learning happening in the classroom? Whether you are face-to-face or online, there are many strategies that you can put into your classroom that only need 3 things. A plan. Everything works much better when there is a plan underpinning what we want to achieve. The active learning strategy that you choose will be completely up to you and based on what you know of your students' strengths and weaknesses. It is not just getting your students to do a task or an activity. It is about allowing them time and space to realize how they are learning. And how can create an active learning plan? Okay, here are some things that you can think about to help you create this plan. What skill do I want my learners to make progress in with this lesson? How can they practice this skill? And when do they need time to reflect on their progress? Before, during, or after the activity? So planning might also involve previewing the resource, for example, the textbook, a media clip, whatever, to make sure that it matches with what you're planning to do. Once you have achieved your plan, it is time to spark curiosity with your questions. So ask curious questions. How can we phrase questions that can either be a source of curiosity and excitement, or a repeated pattern that students learn to put less effort into? Our use of questions also needs to have a strategy and a purpose to connect the learning to the student that makes the thinking process rich and deep. If you wish to find some more information about asking higher order thinking questions, please watch another video in my YouTube channel about questions. And then the third step is having an observant mind. Active learning relies on you, on me, on us teachers being able to observe, synthesize, and evaluate the information gained from the students, and then innovate to create a lesson that builds on from this knowledge. So, how can we use this active learning approach? Okay, first of all, choose meaningful activities or questions. One of the most important aspects of active learning is choosing the activities or the questions that you're going to use in the class. Think about skills as well as subject content. Different learning outcomes need different types of tasks. So think about what your students particularly need to help them to achieve. And when deciding what to ask or what to have students do, ask yourself these questions. What are the most important things students should learn from this class? What misconceptions or difficulty do students commonly have related to this particular content? And what kind of practice can they do that will help them prepare for example, an upcoming assignment or an assessment? Another thing to bear in mind, ask open-ended questions. Use the answers to these questions to choose activities and more questions, which will give students opportunities to meaningfully engage with the material. You want to have students engage in work that gives them feedback on how well they are understanding the material and practice in using the skills important for succeeding in the course. Assessment for learning techniques work particularly well as you are getting started with active learning. Using these strategies or variations of these strategies can help you hold students' attention and help them better retain and transfer knowledge and skills from your course. Also, develop a facilitation approach. How you choose to facilitate active learning will be influenced by the context of your course, the number of your students, the type of furniture in your class, the time you have available, and also by the type of activity. Students can work individually, in pairs, in small groups, and these groups can be predetermined by you, or they can be organized by the same students. One of the most effective approaches is to give students a short period of time to think on their own. For example, 30 to 90 seconds, and then have them work in pairs or small groups. If you are in a classroom with fixed seats, it's still possible for students to work together, but, well, you may need to encourage them to move themselves to get into groups. If you have a student sitting alone, it's often easier and more effective to ask a group to invite an individual to join them rather than direct an individual to join a nearby group. Also, keep students on task. One of the most important elements of successful active learning is students feeling at ease and feeling also a sense of accountability for participating in the assigned activity. If they don't, they can very easily get off task, switch off, or choose not to do what you have asked. Students also tend to stay on task when they feel the value and the relevance of the task they have been asked to complete. When tasks are similar or clearly related to upcoming assignments or assessments, students are intrinsically motivated to practice in order to prepare for that graded work. Finally, keep activities short. Give students a clear goal or task rather than a general instruction like discuss your answer, for example. Tell students you are going to give them a limited and specified time to work. And of course, if they need more time, you can provide it if possible. Also, consider having wrap-up activities. After students have worked in small groups, take a time to provide a conclusion to the activity. This wrap-up is often where the most important learning takes place. You can ask one group of students to share their reasoning or ask others if they had alternative ideas or approaches. If a response reflects a common misunderstanding or misconception, invite other students to explain why this line of reasoning is incorrect. And you can also not just correct the response, but help them understand how experts, for example, approach the problem. Also, create a positive environment where students feel that it is safe to take risks. Make sure that all the students are involved in discussion. Choose students to answer rather than inviting them to raise their hands. Give everyone more time to think about what they want to say before they answer. This will help create this positive and safe environment. Finally, gather and record feedback, especially when trying new activities. Develop a habit of recording and collecting feedback about how activities go. Save space in your notes to record your thoughts about an activity after you have done it. This might be as simple as noting when a question or an activity confused the students or how long an activity took. Ask students for feedback. They can tell you if the activities are too long, too short, too easy, too hard, whether they are finding it valuable. This can also provide an opportunity to reiterate why you are doing active learning if you have a group of resistant students. Now, Let's have a look at some active learning in action. For example, creating mind maps and graphic organizers. Students can work in small groups to create concept maps, and this is a useful way for students to create visual representations of models, ideas, and the relationships between concepts. Illustrate the connections that exist between terms or concepts covered in the lesson or in the course material. Identify and organize information, establish meaningful relationships. So then all this can be discussed and critiqued. Also, interesting activities to do. For example, think, pair, share. It allows students to activate their prior knowledge and share ideas about content or beliefs with their peers. It gives them a chance to organize their ideas, first in their own minds. They think individually about a question, about a topic, and then in a smaller group, maybe a pair or a group of 3, they have a chance to discuss their ideas before sharing them with a larger group or with the class. You can display then think, pair, share prompts about a concept and have them think and discuss for a few minutes. For example, here in this sample from a lesson, they can focus on the 3 pictures. So what do you know about shadows? They can look at the 3 pictures and ask learners to look at the shadow and ask, why is the shadow different in each picture? When is the shadow shorter? When is it longer? Why do they change? So they can think about this first, as I said, individually, then they can discuss their ideas in pairs or in groups of 3 before having a whole class discussion or a larger group discussion. Turn and talk. In turn and talk, a question is posed to the class, and students simply turn to the person next to them to discuss. This is a comfortable way for students to share ideas with others, and also it's comfortable when you have either a large class, you cannot allow the students to move around a lot, so it's easier, right? And then they can share with a larger group, with more people around them, for example. You don't need to hear all or any of the ideas shared. The important aspect of this strategy is for the peers to share and for individuals to access their prior knowledge about a topic. For example, you ask the students to turn to someone next to them and discuss their responses to this question, for example. Why do shapes change their size? Tell them to take 2 minutes to discuss with their partner, and each person has time to talk. Reciprocal questioning encourages an open dialogue in which students take on the role of the teacher and create their own questions about a topic, a reading section, a lesson, whatever. After covering a topic of your choice in class, or after assigning a reading selection, for example, divide the class into pairs or small groups and have students come up with a few questions for discussion with the rest of the class. To make this easier for the students, especially for those students who may struggle a bit more with language, you can provide them with question stems, which provide a foundation for a question, but still require students to think critically about the text, the lesson, or the material you are working with. Project work. Project work is wonderful for active learning. Project work is essentially active learning because students have to use different resources, they have to work together, they have to discuss, organize work. So this is active learning in action. You do projects in class, so maximize the potential of project work to turn it into more active learning. And finally, Here you have some more active learning ideas. For example, you may have a display area to show student work, also to put vocabulary flashcards so students have this reference always inside. You can also start portfolios so that students can show the key pieces of work and progress. And if you want to know more about portfolios, there are 2 videos in my YouTube channel where you can see some ideas about portfolios and how to use them in the classroom. Create routines to help them transition between different types of activity efficiently. Maybe setting a timer on screen for transition time. You can use mini whiteboards to get quick feedback, so that you decide what type of feedback, what type of system you want them to use, and so they can use these mini whiteboards. And if at all possible, you make the seating suitable for pair and group work. Okay, these are just some ideas, and I'm sure you will come up with more, and I encourage you to apply this active learning approach to your lessons. If you want to know more, please, you can write to me. Here's my contact. You can find me on LinkedIn and my blog on WordPress. And of course, you can always visit my YouTube channel. And if you like what you see there, you can subscribe to it. If you are on LinkedIn, you can always click on the bell or on my personal hashtag and be updated on everything I do. So this is all for today. Bye.